Hello everyone and welcome to the third episode of the Ignite Knowledge series entitled What Is? My name is Ilva and together with Neo, Gustavo and Chuanming, my co-founders of Ignite, we hope that everyone who is tuning in today is ready to enrich their brain and learn. If you have not joined us before, allow me to give you a brief intro about Ignite and let you know why we have launched this online series. Ignite is an international network of event professionals who wants to make a difference in the event world. We provide specialized consultancy services in combination with active and integrated support of project delivery. We are also strong advocates for education, and it is one of the Ignite's main pillars. Within the scope of education is knowledge sharing, and we believe that knowledge sharing is vital to the continued innovation and improvement of policies and processes of the sport industry, and actually in all other industries for that matter. With that in mind, Ignite launched this What Is series, which serves as a cornerstone of what we hope to be a rich source of information for future and established event professionals alike. The founders of Ignite, who have been working in the industry for the past decade, realize that it is not easy to obtain information and knowledge of the industry, especially in specific topics around the planning and organization of sport events, without getting a practical experience working in an organizing committee or attending a sport management course. So the aim of this series is to provide you of that specific knowledge and information. Each episode will feature a specialist directly from our Ignite family or within our network of experts who has a passion for and practical experience in each focus area. And today we have two good friends of ours, Laura, Canals Cruz, and Paola Mora, who will help us to dive into delegation services. Before I invite them on live, I'll tell a bit about both of them. Both of them have been involved in many major multi-sport events around the world, being in charge of various tasks within Delegation Services Department, and both of them have gained a huge knowledge and experience. Laura was the director of NOC Services and Relations in Buenos Aires 2018 in Youth Olympic Games and is consulting for the International Olympic Committee. Paola has done many events, but currently she's the manager of NOC, National Olympic Committee and National Paralympic Committee Relations and Services in Paris 2024. Both of them are very passionate for this job and for this functional area, and they love what they do. So I'll invite Laura and Paola. Hello.
Hello, Ilva. Hi, everybody.
Hello. So it's nice to see you both, and that you have agreed to share the experience about our favorite topic, about our favorite function area, delegation services. Are you ready to share the knowledge?
We are ready, more than ready.
Very good. So the floor is...
Okay, so now we have the presentation, and we'll go a little bit on what we will talk about today. It needs to be said that Paola and I think, well, Neo and Ilva as well, and anyone who is passionate about this topic and talk about delegation services for hours, we have a time frame. We will try to cover all the major topics. These are some of them, and we'll try to keep it right on schedule. And this is the first, I believe, co-presented What Is session, so bear with us. So I'll do the first, Paola. Our first topic would be delegations.
That's right. And our next topic will be delegation services as a functional area, which this is the name we use for a department within the organizing committee.
Yes, and then we will talk about the importance of delegation services.
Then we will talk about key success factors for NCS. This is what we call the Services Committee area, the National Committee Services Functional Area in an organizing committee.
Yes, and we will go through a timeline of the major milestones the functional area has to go through to achieve success.
Then we will talk about the delegation registration process. We tend to use a lot of acronyms at the games. So if you encounter something like DRP, that's what it means, delegation registration process.
And then we will touch base on some of the games time topics of the functional area as well. And last but not least,
we'll talk about reflections from past games and improvements that we believe should be made.
Exactly. So without further ado, I will start, and I will use a very typical gesture of mine, which is we need to stop. And before we talk about what is delegation services, we need to discuss what is a delegation. And you will see here again the acronyms that Paola was mentioning, NOCs or CGA or NPCs. We're talking about National Olympic Committees or Commonwealth Games Associations or National Paralympic Committees. I'm sure there are others. These are some of the main ones, and this depends, of course, on the kind of event we are talking about. So the idea of our three little friends in the slide is to demonstrate the fact that the delegations, the teams that come to participate in any major event, actually have to juggle with many responsibilities. As Neo kind of explained in the introduction of this What Is session through social media, people think about the athlete parading in the opening ceremony, and most of the times people assume that a delegation's main responsibility is just to type in a computer and just enter names and last names and passport numbers and expiration dates. But actually registering a delegation to go to a game, it means many other things. It means that you need to be in charge of logistics, of food that you're going to bring maybe for your delegation, uniforms, and how it's going to be the arrivals and departures operations for your team, how you're going to manage the quotas of all the people that you need to bring in order to support the athletes in the best possible way, protocol, the discussions we've had about anthems and flags. And in the end, it's the whole work that the delegation does in order to make sure that the athletes arriving will have the best possible experience and will be supported in the best possible way to do their best during the event. So they have a lot of work, and this is our client, and this is our main stakeholder, and these are the delegations that we're talking about when we talk about delegation services.
And now to go into what is delegation services as a functional area, which I mentioned that is the department within an organizing committee. We are responsible mainly, to summarize it, we are responsible for communicating and engaging with the delegations, which are our stakeholder or clients. So this means that we are the link between the organizing committee and the delegations. We function as this filter between the two parties. So to put it in simple terms, we are the FA that liaises with the 30 FAs that an organizing committee normally has, and our clients. So an event like the Olympic Games has 206 NOCs and 182 NPCs. So you cannot have all the delegations interacting with all the FAs at the same time. That would be quite messy. So what we do is we communicate with them, and we also, at NCS, we have the power to set the tone of the communication. So depending on what we want to communicate, it can be a more funny type of communication, because we cultivate this very close relationship with our clients, so we can have this closeness, or we can communicate more solemn and serious items. So but we might want to take a bit of a step back. So the way we communicate with NOCs is by designating a point of contact. So at NCS, what we do is we designate our coordinators to have this direct relationship with each NOC. So for example, I, as a coordinator of NCS, I will be in charge of the relationship exclusively with 10, 12 different countries. And I will be their sole liaison within the organizing committee. So what's my job there? I have to provide them with information. I have to help them with any issues that they might arise. And I will also help define the levels of service of the services that we will provide during the games. So all of this is done in a way, and the NCS team ensures that we all treat the delegations with fairness. That's a principle that we have very important in NCS. You can also say that we have two bosses. We represent the organizing committee with the National Olympic Paralympic Committees and CGAs. And we also represent our clients with the organizing committee. And with that, we go to the next slide.
Exactly. And why is delegation services important? Of course, we all think that the functional area that we're working in an organizing committee is the best and it's the most important, but there is a real a truthness to this statement on why is delegation services important. And we can talk about, as we were saying before, the interaction with the clients and the FAs and the organizing committee, but and you can also say, for example, that we work together with other functional areas to ensure the registration of the delegation. But one of the main things that delegation services does is to centralize the communication. We have, especially before games time, we have the exclusivity of the communication with the client. As Paola was saying before, we are responsible of making sure that they have the information and that they interact with the functional areas through us. By sharing this information, we also get input from the delegations. So we measure the perception that they have on the project. And this is key, because then what will happen is that we will provide this feedback internally. And when you get this input and you get the perception of the client, you have the chance to adjust your operations. And generally, these adjustments have a positive or a negative impact in the budget and in the resources. So it's always good to understand that you become the key point of reference inside the organizing committee to make sure that all the services levels, as Paola was saying before, remain consistent and have the client perspective. And last but not least, you have centralized the communications, you have an understanding of the perception of the client, you provide internally the feedback and you can answer back to your clients. It's all about managing the relationship. And here there's a key point. Managing a relationship is just not exchanging emails or WhatsApp with your client. It's building trust with them. And trust goes both ways. It's not that they feel that they have enough trust with you so that they can tell you how they really feel and what they are their real needs. But it's also that you can share with them the truth about what they're going to expect and what they're going to see once they arrive in the host country. So to give you a little example on how managing this relationship and building this trust, it's very important. And this is super simple. So for example, in one of the events I was working, of course, I was taking care of the Latin American NOCs. They had a very long trip. They were traveling almost for 2 days to come. And after 2 days, they had to wait at the airport like for 2 hours after they had finished everything to start their trip to the village. So my main contact person called me and said, the chef de mission is furious. He is losing his mind. He cannot believe this. And with that phone call that was then built on a relationship of trust, we were able to prepare so that once this delegation arrived in the village, we had a group of people welcoming the delegation, making them feel like we cared because they had felt neglected at the airport. And then we also had everything ready in the welcome center to make sure that the process for the arrival was as fast as possible. So we found ourselves with a very angry client at the airport, and 5 minutes into the arrival in the village, we had a very happy client. And this is built on trust. Just one phone call saved us from a lot of trouble. So in the bottom line of all these points on and why it's important to have a good delegation services team is that you set the expectations. And when the client is prepared, they really know what is coming, and they can make their own plans so that they can complement your operation.
And now we go to speak about the success factors for us in delegation services. So one of the first steps to be taken is that upper management in the organizing committee realizes the importance of the client and us as the representatives of this client. So we all know that athletes are the stars of the event, but the management of these athletes is done through their delegations. So athletes, the delegations, they understand the needs of the athletes, but they also understand the needs of the coaches, the needs of the medical team, the physiotherapists, all the logistics that go around preparing and bringing the team to a multi-sport event. And to give just an example of this, we had not an issue, but there was questions about the quality of beds and mattresses at one of the villages. And one of the delegations realized that this was going to be a problem for their athletes. So they got ahead of this situation, and they brought mattress toppers to the village with them. So they realized that this might have been a problem. So they got ahead, they were proactive, and they were able to avoid this becoming a problem for their athletes. So if upper management understands the strategic role that the NOCs and NPCs play, that's the best way that we can start. Laurita, and now speaking about strategic platform.
Now it's my turn. So one of the things about strategic platforms is that the organizing committee first needs to have a clear vision. And this is very important. And we will touch base on this and how this affects the role of our functional area. But if the organizing committee knows where they're going and what they're going to do, it gives a frame to your work, meaning that you can take advantage of every communication opportunity, and you are aligned, you remain consistent, and you keep conveying the message of the organizing committee over and over and over again. And everything is aligned. Again, giving a frame to your work, it remains one of the success factors that will, in no uncertain terms, impact every other step of the way of what you will do as a functional area.
And last but not least, yes, by realizing that delegation services is the client representative for delegations, we realize that delegation services is the keeper of the experience of the event. This means it's a tricky situation because it means we have to keep a balance between the operations that the organizing committee is able to do and to provide and the client experience. It does mean that we will have to manage expectations with our clients, and we also have to practice the art of saying no in, of course, the best possible way. We cannot always say yes, because this would be creating false expectations. But that being said, we are in a position, and we always strive to defend our clients with the rest of the FAs in terms of the services that they will provide. In this definition of the service levels, we can become very unpopular at some times, but in taking care of this experience, we are one step closer to ensuring the success of the event, because we are taking into consideration the needs of our clients without putting at risk the operations of the event.
And now we go into the timeline on what NCS, the steps that NCS should go through in order to achieve the best possible outcome. And it has to be said that the work of delegation services starts way in advance, and sometimes it's a very lonely job. It's only you remain a one-person functional area for a lot of time. But it's really important, because once you have someone as a representative of the functional area, you are ensuring that in the planning of the event, you are taking under consideration the client's perspective and the client's interests, which is very important from the foundation of any organizing committee. What will happen is that once the organizing committee has a strategic platform, as we were saying before, you will be able to develop your communication strategy. And this is where you fly a little bit and get crazy and say, okay, these are all the things I would like to achieve as a functional area. And then you move on into the planning and the budget. And we put these two at the same level because it goes very much hand in hand. When you talk about the planning, you're talking about what structure you're going to give to your team. You review all the milestones that you're going to have to go through. For example, the Chef de Mission seminar is always a big one. And the framework you give to any of those milestones is completely and directly related to the budget. So you can go as high or as low as your budget goes high or goes low. And then it's time to move on to the team. And then you think, okay, this is the team that I will need. Now that you know the budget, you have to put the right people in the right place. And you find the team. And one of the things that I find most interesting about this particular phase is that you need to find the right team, not only from a CV perspective, but you need to make sure that all the elements and the parts of the team fit with each other. Because sometimes when you have someone that not necessarily fits into the team, this creates disruption. And once you have disruptions, you start having problems within the team. So it's not only finding the right profile, but finding the right profile that fits into the team that you want to have for your event. And this also helps with the alignment of your communication strategy that once again is aligned with the strategic platform of the organizing committees and the values that you're going to communicate. After you have the team, or while you are building the team, you also need to make sure that this team is trained. I cannot stress enough how important it is to invest in the training of your team. And the reason why this is important is because mainly you are a client representative. So if your team understands their role, the role of your functional area, the role of your clients within the event, and especially understands their needs, then they will be able to represent that client in front of any functional area. And this will then have a new effect in the positioning of the functional area in the organizing committee. what any delegation services functional area should aim for is to become the referent of the NOC or NPC or CGA client within the organizing committee. Our goal should be that anytime any functional area is thinking of providing a service to your client, they should say, oh, we need to check with delegation services. So that's one of the key elements. So you have a cascade effect. So you have the team, then you have the training, and that helps positioning you in the organizing committee. And then you have to prepare as well for the delivery. It's not the same to talk about the pre-games or what you do when you are sitting in an office to when you move on into an operational mode and games time. So then you need to prepare as well for that. This timeline does not always work in this exact same order. Every organizing committee goes through their own planning strategies and phases and ups and downs. But in the end, these are the key elements that you will have to go through as a functional area. And then, and this is a non-written bonus on this timeline, you also have to think about the knowledge management. Because, and it was part of what Ilva said as part of the vision as well of Ignites, you need to share the knowledge. And the reason why you need to share the knowledge is because you need to make sure that the next organizing committee has the best possible experience as well. And for that, you need to be accountable for everything you do while you are transiting this road of delivering a games, working with indicators, measuring, having facts, and not just working on assumptions. It's very common when you are developing the service levels, like lots of delegations do this and that. And then it turns out that we're talking about maybe 10 delegations in a universe of over 200. And is it that a relevant sample? You need to balance these kind of things. And when you have facts and when you have numbers, then you can work better in your planning and use your resources more effectively. So for me, the knowledge management is very relevant. It's transversal. It goes throughout the whole process. It starts by having a written communication strategy, and it holds you accountable for your work.
I would have to say about that knowledge management process, currently in NCS at Paris 2024, this is something that I really rely on. So it is, I am very grateful when organizing committees actually document their stuff properly. So it works. So please keep that in mind, not only for NCS, but for all FAs.
Yes.
So now we will move on to talk a bit about the delegation registration process, or the DRP, as we love to call it. Full disclosure here that this is an overview, and there will be more detailed sessions on this topic in the upcoming What Is series. This delegation process that we're about to talk about is the current process. There are some modifications that are in the works, but we don't know the outcome of that yet. So we're going to talk about the current process. So this is a key process for NCS. It is led by NCS, and we collaborate mainly with accreditation, with sport entries and qualifications, and with the village, particularly the allotment team, during the delegation registration process. We also have a bit of finance component in there, but their part becomes more relevant towards the end. So this is a very lengthy process that starts with the estimated team size calculator, another acronym there. So we start about 2 years prior to the games with the first estimation of the team size of every single delegation that will come to the games based on data from past games. The ETS helps us at the OCOG to plan for several things, such as the spaces at the village, the allotment, and the entitlements that every team will get based on their team size. This means that they will get associated to their team sizes the number of volunteers that will help them during the games, the number of dedicated cars, the number of upgrade cards, and even the number of Coca-Cola fobs that they will get. Then we move on to qualifications. So qualifications, they begin these for the games in question. This means that the competitions in which the International Federation of a given sport, they approve these events as an event in which you are building points to qualify for these games. So the World Championships of Judo, the Judo World Masters, it becomes a qualification event for the Olympic Games. Yes, so, and now we move on to the year of the games. NCS accreditation and sport entries. We work with all NOCs and NPCs to register all the possible people that will come to the games in the accreditation system. So we really ask them to be very, very thorough in their lists and registrations, because this is the list in which we will base all the rest of the process. The accreditation process, the accreditation system, that we ask them to register their people in, is tailor-made for the events. It's based on modules from past games, but it is tailored to the event. And then we have also the entry by number, in which NOCs and NPCs make their best guess as to the number of athletes they will have per discipline. This, we can say that it's a more refined estimated team size calculator. Now, this is a process that happens at the Pan American Games. The process for the Olympic Games is a little bit different, more, I would say, automated. Then we move on to the pre-DRM. This is about 3 months prior to the games. These are meetings that we do with every NOC and NPC, in person or online. We, due to the current situation, we are moving to the idea of doing all of these more online. And these meetings become an opportunity to further build the relationship with each NOC and NPC. And what we do during these meetings is we review the data of entry by number and of the accreditation system deadline. So we review passport numbers, correct names, dates of birth. It's a very, very long process in which, again, NCS, SEQ, accreditation are involved. After this, we can say that we have a good list to go to the next step, which is the background check. So we send all of this data to the authorities of the host country so they can validate each person and check their background data. So once we know we have the list okayed by them, we are able to print what we call the PVCs, the pre-valid cards. So these pre-valid cards are actually the printout of the accreditation card that we send by post to them, so they can use this pre-valid card as a visa to come to the host country. And then we come to the time when qualifications end, and we go to entry by name. So we know exactly who is coming to the games. Then we go to the period of the games and the delegation registration meeting. So these meetings actually take place in person at the village, with ideally the chef de mission from each country that come a few days prior to when their delegation starts to arrive. So these meetings can start from the pre-opening period of the village, which begins about 17 days prior to the opening ceremony of the games. So we have a whole 2 weeks of meetings with NOCs and a bit less with NPCs when it's their time to come, in which we finalize their team sizes. We go again through their accreditation list and cancel any people who will not come to the games. And as a result of the number of athletes, we will get the number of team officials and the number of entitlements. As I mentioned, the upgrade cards, the number of cars, the number of team assistants that will be with them during the games. And they also go through their allotment at the village, so we can actually, at the end of the DRM, tell them exactly where they're going to be and hand them their keys to their apartment so they can start to their check-in. So once the DRM is done, the chef de mission and these people who accompany him to this meeting are able to validate their accreditation, and we can say that they are now officially welcome to come to the games. And in the opening period, we can also start welcoming athletes.
Yeah, and one thing maybe if I can jump in is to say that this is not the only process to register a delegation. That, for example, for the Youth Olympic Games, we have the delegation registration process, which is actually done in advance. And all these steps that Paola was talking about that happen at the DRM are finished before the departure of the NOCs or delegations from their home country to come to the host city.
So that actually, in some cases, sounds even more efficient.
Yeah. So we will rush through the next couple of slides we have during the games.
So during the games, just to let you know that NCS Delegation Services is based at the village or villages. We usually have some sort of representation at satellite villages, or if there is some other village far away. However, we do not operate the village. And what we do at games time is that our communications and interactions with NOCs and NPCs evolve. Even though they are now free to talk to FAs directly at what we call the services center. So this services center is a one-stop shop where we will have services from different areas, what we call the functional area desks, where an NOC and NPC can come and approach a representative from the different functional areas to ask them questions directly. So I have a question about transport schedule, so I can come and actually talk to someone from transport. Even though this happens and they have this freedom to go to FAs, we still remain their primary points of contact. They still come to us, to our offices. We're still available for them on the phone as they come and visit us. We're also available through the chef de mission meetings, which we hold in the mornings of the games. And we have these volunteers that are with the delegations, but they are our ambassadors, so to speak, because they are a liaison between us at NCS and the delegation. And yes,
we move on to some reflections on delegation services. I'm crazy about pop culture references, and now I said it properly, so there will be some coming this slide. I promise it's the only slide I will use them. As we were saying before, and I'm sure some of the people watching can testify to this, NCS or delegation services is hated. And I think maybe planning and delegation services are always there fighting for who's hated the most in the organizing committee. Because we represent our clients, we get involved in pretty much everything because delegations are involved in most of the processes of any organizing committee. So it turns out that people think we are meddling into their work or we're trying to do their work for them, which is most definitely not the case, just making sure the client has the best possible experience, which means that you will have to work on some hate coming your way. It's part of the work. We just learn to live with that and try to make it as less annoying as possible. Sometimes we fail at that, but never mind. The second thing, and it was also already mentioned, is that saying no is part of the job. And there's a reflection and there's something to be said about this. And we have the Rolling Stones with a great song to remind us on what is the possible outcome of saying no. So you don't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you get what you need. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to help the delegation. It means that sometimes you just cannot do whatever they're asking. And it's not possible for budget reasons or operational reasons. It's just not possible. So we facilitate, we try to find a solution together, but then you work on a case-by-case basis and not necessarily applying the same solution for all the clients. So whenever you get to this point, just remember the Rolling Stones, it helps a lot. So you're not going to make the NOCs happy all the time, and even if you do your best, and even if you satisfy all their needs and you do anything they ask, they won't be happy, all of them. So it's just something that you need to learn to live as part of the job as well. And again, I apologize to any Lord of the Rings fans, but that is the Eye of Sauron. And my point with having the Eye of Sauron there is that NCS is an overview on all the FAs. We don't need to know the details of the operations of every functional area, but we do understand what happens with our client in every functional area. So we have an omnipresent view, like the Eye of Sauron, and this is what it's also very important and very interesting about the functional area, is that you get to see a little bit of everything. And in order to not keep this too long, we'll go to our last slide. And one of the things we always like to say is that we need integration. And integration we meant in different levels. So one of the things we want to be clear about is that we need to integrate the different tools that we have available for our clients. And we need to integrate them. Right now, they just access different platforms that they're not interconnected among them. And you also need to take advantage of the tools available. So for example, and this was a great learning that Paola and I got when we were in Lima. We were just there for the games time. And the NCS team just created a WhatsApp group with all the delegations. Nothing more obvious or simple than that. It worked great. It's a great tool because the chefs de missions are generally on the run. They're not checking their email. It's faster. They also generally have WhatsApp groups with their own team leaders for each sport. So whatever you send them, they can forward into their own WhatsApp groups, meaning that as an organizing committee, you become very efficient in disseminating urgent information. So that was great. Also, they had like the best stickers of Milko, the mascot, with hearts and things and doing things, which we love and we still use, by the way. So it's also a great way to set the tone, to be friendlier with your client, and to keep pushing for content for your organizing committee, even through WhatsApp, through social media.
And speaking of integration, something we've also identified is that we also need a better integration within the team. This means that we should look at the team as a full Olympic and Paralympic Games team, and not seeing it separately as having some team members dedicated for the Olympic Games and other members dedicated to the Paralympic Games. Also, there is also a large distinction between the relations team, which we have spoken about, which are in direct contact with the delegations, and the services team, which provides support which look after the assistants, these volunteers that are with each delegation, which are in charge of the services center. So we need to stop seeing the NCS team as separate entities and work closer together. This means that we will have more equality within the team, and we all get to pitch in different tasks, and we all get to learn about the different processes of the FA.
Absolutely. And also, we need to talk a little bit more about technology and the tools we have available. As I was saying before, right now there's a little bit of lack of integration between the different platforms. And I think one of the things we can do in delegation services is to find ways to integrate and provide a better service for our clients. So, for example, in Buenos Aires 2018, we had our own extranet. It was custom made for the games. And one of the tools that we had available was that we as a team, as a functional area, we could track the progress on every major milestone from all our national Olympic committees on a personal basis, meaning the NOCs that were assigned specifically to you, on a continental basis, so that the team, the manager could see what was happening and have a general picture, or to see all of them at the same time, which was mainly for general tracking purposes. This is great because that means that you can go specifically to every client to bother them and say, hey, we're needing this, we're missing this, what can I do to help you? And also, from a client perspective, it meant that they had an overview of every major milestone they had with the organizing committee. So all they needed to do was to log into our platform and see what they were up to date and what things they were halfway through and what things they hadn't started at all, with reminders for their deadlines and things like that. It was just not a repository of documents, but it was an interactive tool with also forms and things like that, which was very, very helpful, especially now that there are so many events in the calendar. It's really great that for an NOC, you can just go online and see, okay, this is how I stand in regards to this specific event.
And another opportunity we have identified is the publications. So as of now, we publish a large amount of publications for NOCs and NPCs. And this at some point becomes impossible to keep up with. So we need to think about the format and the volume of these publications. And there is a need to review this concept as a whole. We're not entirely sure what the solution is, but it's certainly a process that needs to be worked on a lot.
And that it also requires a lot of work from the side of the organizing committees, like a never-ending streak of publications.
Yes, it starts very early on with the first contact with the delegations, and it ends all the way up to after the games when we do our final communications.
So that's it from our side. Ilva?
Thank you, Laura and Paola, for the very interesting presentation, and I loved your interaction between both of you. And
we're in sync. We're in sync.
And telling really like the department where I have worked, and Xuan Ming, our other co-founder, it's so bright, so wide, and it covers so many topics. And we have a few questions from our listeners. So first one is from Martin. Why your interaction and early planning with accreditation and Olympic Village function areas is so important?
Well, take that or should I?
Take it. Well, I continue.
Okay, let's go. So accreditation, just to separate the two topics a little bit, and maybe they'll intertwine. Accreditation is important to have this interaction early on because we define the delegation registration process. And we review the concepts of accreditation from past games, and we also adapt certain things that will respond to our context and our reality.
Yes,
Do you want to take the village?
Well, I think in the relevant part about the interaction with accreditation is that we lead the registration process, and what you get from the registration process is a lot of information, and that information impacts a lot of functional areas for their planning. So, for example, the village will be one of those when they need to work on the allotment and all the spaces that they need to assign to each delegation. The source of truth will come from the registration process. And as we lead the registration process, that's why it's so important to interact with these functional areas, who, as we mentioned before, are the few that also share the exclusivity of the communications together with sport entries and qualification during pre-games.
And just to add to the Olympic Village interaction, normally there is this process of construction of the village. So if we really study and have this close relationship with villages and the team there, we have an opportunity to have some input and have some input that we know is important for our clients for the way that their final spaces will look like. So we give them certain guidelines, and we work very closely with villages to make sure that they take into account the needs that we know our clients will have.
So when we then communicate, we can set the expectations for the client.
The next question. When running the background checks, if any criminal activity is found, do you notify the country of origin? Have you had any cases?
Yes, we've had cases like this. I think it will be a more interesting question for the upcoming What Is sessions for registration. It's a delicate process, and in the end, it's managed with the different stakeholders. What you communicate with the client is that the registration was not approved.
Mm-hmm.
There are some limitations to the level of information that you can share.
Sure.
And great name, by the way, for the person who asked it. She also likes pop culture references.
Yes.
Thank you,
Question from Andres. You just mentioned that having the pre-DRM processes done online would make it more efficient. Given your experience, what would be another innovation you suggest for this functional area management?
Well, it's this whole trying to move many things online in general, I think. Taking advantage, as Laura just explained, of the technology to be able to make better communications, and also moving on to online interactions, meaning instead of doing in-person visits, trying to innovate with different tools so we can have an online interaction with our clients. And this means that we can provide information through a webinar, and we can also perhaps look at other solutions to make them feel as if they were at the venues, or give them more information about the venues through these tools. We know that there are some things out there that are helpful. The tricky part is implementing them.
Yes, and again, this has a great impact as well on the budget, not only from a delegation perspective, because then you need to plan for these trips and not all delegations have the same resources, but also from an organizing committee perspective. It means that if you somehow can manage this online, then your resources will be better. Admin, if you can manage to do things remotely, it means that it's, again, less budget for you, or a budget used in a more efficient way, because you're able to put it in different ways, not just one person spending a whole day with a delegation, which also impacts other things related to their day-to-day work. So we're all happy to welcome the delegations, but every time a delegation comes, it's a very time consuming. And that's also a resource that we need to take care of in the games.
Yeah, true. Another question. Do you think online DRMs are possible? Qualification systems as they are today make this really hard to happen.
Yes, and I think Neo will be able to answer this further in future sessions, but I think the qualification systems need to be adjusted. If you moved, I mean, let's put it this way, in the Youth Olympic Games, we have already done this. It's true that it's a much simpler process because there are less events. So I think it's possible, but then the whole process needs to be adjusted. And one of the key elements to make this happening is to adjust the qualification systems from all the sports. I think it's a transition, and again, the IOC have provided a good training platform, and I think the next step is to move it to other events. It's also been done, for example, in the World Beach Games, where we were also involved. So yes, I think it's possible.
And then related to this question, Neo is asking, can you elaborate why are the qualification systems making it hard to happen?
I think you are the expert there. Can you enlighten us?
Yes.
So we will allow Neo to answer this question when her session about sport entries comes.
Yes, we will take that one.
One more question. What would you say are the typical mistakes delegation services fall into? What is your advice as to what should be avoided at all costs?
Oof, not saying no is a big one.
I'll take it from another perspective. I think one is the one that Paola was saying is with regards to the client. I also think that from an internal point of view, it's which is our default position, is to be hated by other functional areas. I think that's a typical mistake. What I think we should all aim to do is to make it as painless as possible to be annoying as a functional area. And in the end, if you build a good relationship with the other functional areas, you will come to a good outcome. So yeah, from two perspectives.
Yes. And some of our and your colleagues from different functional areas disagree that people hate NCS. You see, no, people love NCS. Gustavo, I agree with Martin.
You're all lying. They really hate us. We have many anecdotes that can support that, but we won't be sharing them here.
So these were the questions from our listeners, and just a few questions from my side. Laura, to be successful in this area of work, what kind of skills a person needs?
Well, there's a diplomatic way to go through this answer. The first one is that you need to know languages, because you are generally, in most cases, interacting with countries that speak different languages. So I would say that's a must. The second one is that you need to be curious about other cultures. I think when you have that interest in learning about the delegations that you will take care of, you become a better coordinator or manager. And this is my non-diplomatic part of the answers, you really have to be a little bit of an overachiever, and to always want to be right somehow, because you need to have a stand in making sure that your client is properly represented. So somehow you need to gain that higher ground, and then that means that you need to be very confident.
But a substantiated higher ground.
Yes,
so
exactly.
The training part there becomes essential. I would add to that generally NCS is a team of very, very resilient people. There's a lot of demands that come with the job, so we have to be prepared for that prior to and during the games.
Yeah, and it goes in hand as well with this notion that you won't be able to make everybody happy. And even if you do your best, you plan your best, you deliver your best, there's always someone who will complain and who will not be happy with the service you are providing. So you also need to be resilient in that way.
Yes. And then, Paola, what was your first event?
My first event was the Pan American and Pan American Games in my hometown back in 2011. And I can say that it changed my life. So I will be forever grateful to the other flaca, Ana Paula Gonzalez, for bringing me over and introducing me to that world and everything that came after that. So thanks to that, and all the experiences I have acquired over the years, I have been able to be right now where I am, doing what I love, and being with the people that I love, you guys as well, and I feel very lucky.
And Laura, what was your first event?
My first event was as a volunteer in South American Games that were not supposed to happen in Buenos Aires, but did, and were organized like in 6 months, which then gave me the chance to go to Pan American Games in Rio and then move on to the Youth Olympics.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the answers to our questions. And we actually have had more than 40 people listening today to your presentation.
Thank you to our spectators.
Thank
in
you.
Mexico and everywhere else in the world. Thank you very much for listening.
And we did have from worldwide, from Europe, from Asia, from Argentina, from Brazil, and we really had a wide audience. Or if anyone has more questions or you would like to learn more, you can contact Paola and Laura on LinkedIn and ask any questions if you have.
Yes. Or torment us through WhatsApp.
Yes. Thank you both for sharing your experience and introducing us and our viewers today into delegation services. I hope that those who listen in and those who will be watching this record at a later stage got a snapshot of the behind the scenes to delegation services. Our next What Is episode will be held next Wednesday, July 29, or at 17:00 Swiss time, and where our colleague who comes from our preferred system partner, Visting, he will be answering the question, what is event registration? Tune in, and thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Paola. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Elva.
So great weekend, everyone, and see you next week.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.